Hello everyone. Before Shakespeare, before novels, and before the printing press, there were epic poems, tragic heroes, and divine destinies. Welcome to the classical period. In this video, we will talk about the classical period and its time frame. I'll explain some of the terms like AD and BC. I'll mention some of the major historical events that took place during the classical period. We'll see what are the differences between these words, Roman, Greek, Latin, and I'll show some of the differences between the Greek and the Roman mythologies. We'll mention some key characteristics of the classical period, and of course we'll talk about some of the authors and their literary works and the language and the literary devices used during that period. At the end of the video, we will talk about the difference between what we call classical and classic. And most importantly, is the classical period part of English literature? Let's get to know together. So let's start with these terms, BCE and CE. BCE, we see it like next to dates like in the example here, 500 BCE or 2024 CE. BCE stands for before the Common Era. CE stands for the Common Era. BCE is equivalent to BC, which means before Christ, and CE is equivalent to AD, the year of the Lord. So they both refer to the same calendar dates, but what is the difference? BCE and CE are used in non-religious contexts, like in academic articles or some historical books. Meanwhile, BC and AD, they are normally used in religious contexts. So they are the same, BCE before Common Era, CE the Common Era, BC before Christ, and AD the year of the Lord. Next, we have some of the historical events that took place during the classical period. I'll mention the Trojan War. It's important that to remember that the Trojan War is a fictional or a legendary war. There aren't any pieces of evidence that it was a real war. Anyway, it's considered an important event in the historical background of this era. And the foundation of Rome and other events we can say like the life of Jesus Christ, the sack of Rome, and many other events that we cannot cover since it's a very long period. Next, we have some confusing words. I myself and many of my students and my colleagues used to confuse these words. So, Greek, Roman, Latin, Rome, what are the differences between these words? Greek is the adjective for the word Greece. So Greek refers to ancient Greece, the land of Homer, Athens, democracy, and philosophy. Roman refers to ancient Rome, the empire that came later. So remember, the Greek Empire or the Greek nation came before the Roman one. And the Roman Empire was heavily influenced by Greece. Latin, however, is the language of the Romans. So Greek from Greece and Latin is the language of the Romans. And of course, Rome is the capital city of the Roman Empire. So the Greek language used by classical authors like Homer, Sophocles, and Plato, Aristotle. Meanwhile, Latin language used by authors like Ovid and Virgil. So remember, Greece came first, Rome came later. Greek influenced the Roman culture deeply. Next, here we have the Roman and the Greek mythologies. So, if somebody asks you, who is the king of gods in mythology, you'll have to answer him or her or ask them back, do you mean the Greek mythology or the Roman mythology? Because gods and goddesses have different names and different functions in each mythology. Sometimes you may find the same name or the same god or goddesses, but with different function in the other mythology. For example, in the Greek mythology, Zeus is the king of the gods. Meanwhile, Jupiter is the king in the Roman mythology. Venus is the goddess of love in the Roman mythology, but in the Greek one, Aphrodite is the goddess of love. So there are many differences, and we will get to know some of like the qualities that distinguish each mythology. So the Greek one, in general, it's more emotional and personal. The Roman mythology, also in general, it's more structured and more symbolic. So the Greek myths usually consist of tragedies, conflicts, and passion. The Roman myths include usually like duty, honor, and the empire or the state. The key characteristics of this classical period, as far as the style is concerned, mostly we see formal elevated structure, and the themes are about faith, heroism, honor, morality, war, love, and such topics. We see many different forms and genres like epic poetry, tragedy, and comedy. And this is very important because up till now we still use comedy and tragedy. So they are among the oldest genres used in literature. And of course, it's a long period, so we cannot talk about all the authors or even not all the important ones. Here I just gave 3 examples like Homer, Sophocles, and Virgil. Okay, these writers had a profound influence on Western literature. So remember, the classical period is not part of English literature. It's before English literature. It's the start of Western literature, let's say, or the foundation of Western literature. Here even the English language was not there yet. So, languages and literary devices. Here, if you want, you may pause the video and read these devices, literary devices, and their definitions, like epic similes, allusions to mythology, dramatic irony, and allegory, and other literary devices. They were all seen heavily in classical literature. And of course, when we talk about the visuals and the artwork during that time, the first thing that comes to our mind is like marble sculptures and also like paintings, architecture. For its impact, this classical period is very important. As I said previously, it inspired later genres, and we still up till these days use tragedy, comedy that we learned from the classical literature. And there is something that we might confuse. What's not in the classical period? So remember, we talked in this video about BC and AD, which are Christian terms for eras. Old and Middle English are not in the classical period. The classical period came before English. It's the foundation of Western literature. So Beowulf, allegorical plays like Everyman, and these, they all came after the classical period. Classical period is older than English literature. In the video that I made about the literary periods, I don't include the classical period because it's not a part of English literature. It's before English literature. It's the foundation for Western literature. So we come to this point: classical period versus classic literature. Classic literature, let's say, they are not the same word. So what causes this confusion? For example, you can say you've just said that classical literature is not English literature and it's before. But we hear these words a lot, like the classics of Shakespeare, the classics of Jane Austen, or many other famous authors. So what's the difference between these two words? So classical refers to the period that I talked about. Classic is like an adjective. Now I'll give you example. The classical period, as we said, a specific historical era. Classic literature, it's any literature from any period that is highly respected and very famous, let's say. So we call it classic because it's famous, it's important, it's nice, maybe, according to some people. So even we all watch football, like we say the classic match between Real Madrid and Barcelona. It's of course because it's highly respected, a lot of people watch it, it's an important event and it happens regularly, so that's why it's called classic. So when somebody says like the classics of Shakespeare or the classics of Jane Austen, it is not related to the classical period. Classical period is totally different term. So the classical period, when we talk about it, remember it's Latin and Greek, not English. It focuses on ancient Greek and Roman texts. Classical literature can come from any time period. When we say classical period author, we cannot say Shakespeare or Jane Austen. We say Homer, Virgil, Sophocles. But we have some famous authors on the other hand, like George Orwell, Jane Austen, and Shakespeare, of course. So the classical period, as I said, it's Greek and Latin, and classic literature, or what we call classic literature, usually written in modern languages like English or Russian, like we say the classics of Leo Tolstoy, for example. So I hope that this video was useful for you. In this video we talked about the classical periods. In the next video we will talk about the medieval period, which is the first period in English literature. Some of you might confuse it. The medieval period includes Old English and Middle English. So I'll see you in the next video. I hope that this was useful for you. See you in the next video.